Well, what a fucking pathetic attempt at a movie this was. I mean, you had the roots already planted, man. The blueprint had already been laid out by the video games, and somehow they still managed to fuck it all up. I don't even know how that's possible. It's extremely telling that the first ever Uncharted game is a far superior cinematic experience than the movie will ever be. The film Uncharted had high expectations, no doubt, given how beloved the video games are, but unfortunately, it fails to deliver on every mark. Speaking of Marky Mark, we'll get to that shithouse later, but seriously though, it failed to deliver the thrilling and immersive experience fans hoped for. If there ever was a video game that would work even better as a movie, it was this one, and fans of the series have been begging for it since 2007. Uncharted itself was already a cinematic universe prior to the film's release, with over 4 video games, boasting a heart-touching, globe-trotting story. But despite an ambitious attempt to adapt the popular gaming franchise to the big screen, the movie struggles with several key issues. Starting off with a weak plot and pacing, the story feels more disjointed than the fucking Elephant Man, lacking the engaging treasure hunting intrigue that made the game so iconic. The pacing is so horrible, and it gives off the impression immediately with a boring start to the movie. 5 minutes in, and the movie already feels like it's dragging. It relies so heavily on predictable tropes, and the overall plot lacks any depth or clever twist to sustain the audience's interest over time. I forgot the whole fucking plot as soon as I left my seat. That's how uninteresting it was. The film opens on the infamous plane scene you see in the trailers, and immediately you think you ain't going to be in for a real enjoyable ride here. But that was just a smokescreen, as it jumps right back into time, where you see Nathan Drake as a child with his brother trying to steal something. Already a bad start. 10 minutes in, and you can already feel how fragmented the pacing is. Besides the terrible plot and horrible pacing, we have to address the elephant in the room, and it's not just an ordinary elephant, it's the biggest elephant you've ever seen, cause it's the cast, the casting, man. Whoever is responsible for organising this cast should never work in Hollywood again, and I mean that, man. I think nearly everyone can agree that this film was so horribly casted. A bunch of A-list stars who have no connection to the character that they're playing. I still remember the backlash when it was announced that Tom Holland will be playing Nathan Drake. Mine and everyone else's immediate reaction was like, huh? Isn't he fucking 12 years old or something? The casting of Tom Holland as Nathan Drake and Mark Wahlberg as Sully was contentious to say the least, and their phoned-in performances don't dispel any doubts. Holland is charismatic, but the role is just too big for his boots, often portraying himself as a younger, less seasoned version of Drake that doesn't align with the game's character. Nathan Drake is a badass old school type of hero, the ones we grew up on. He had that Rambo John McClane vibe to him. Tom Holland has a very childish vibe to him. He's like a fucking baby Spider-Man, and he honestly just played Nathan Drake like a slightly older, slightly gayer Peter Parker. Tom Holland playing Nathan Drake makes as much sense as Ross Geller playing Mike Tyson, man. Mark Wahlberg's Sully was perhaps an even worse choice. He completely lacks the charm and gruff fans associate with the role. Marky Mark is the same in every role, and sometimes that works, but this time it just didn't. Despite his best efforts, the script was just so bad. His character came off as extremely unlikable and just douchey, nothing like the lovable old man figure Sully was in the games. The antagonist played by the legendary Antonio Banderas was so forgettable, you would legit forget he was even in the fucking film. His character was so underused, and for the plot they were going for, he needed to be more menacing and evil, but again, he was more like an extremely watered down Disney villain. There was no stakes between him and Nathan whatsoever. He was as generic as they come. On top of all of that, the action sequences were so shite, they make the tweenies look like the fucking Expendables. The games are as brutal and in your face as ever, and to this day, they have some of the best third-person action video game has to offer. The movie, however, missed the mark majorly when they decided to go PG-13, automatically cutting out all the violence and gun shootouts the fans were used to in the video games. It's a real shame that the action set pieces in the game are more spectacular and amazing than a single action scene in the movie, which all fell flat and again was so unengaging you just couldn't wait for it to end. While the film attempts to replicate the cinematic set pieces of the games, the execution fell flat each time. The action scenes feel overly reliant on CGI, losing the sense of realism and danger that made the source material so compelling. The final battle scene looked decent enough, but with the lack of violence and shootouts, it played out more like the ending of a Peter Pan or something. The Uncharted games are known for their immersive environments and historical depth, but the movie settings feel generic and uninspired. There's little sense of adventure or discovery. The cinematography department must have been on strike or something, because they could have really took advantage of the $120 million budget and actually used real life exotic locations rather than depending entirely on that fucking blue screen. The games took you on unforgettable adventures, from snowy mountains to ancient tombs. This movie takes you to a fucking Papa John. The relationship between the characters, especially between Drake and Sully, feels so underdeveloped. The banter is so forced and the emotional stakes are so low, making it hard to invest in the journey. Plus, with the horrible pacing, it doesn't feel like much of an adventure at all. It barely scratches the surface of being mildly entertaining. They didn't even use any of the plots from the source material and failed to include a lot of the beloved characters from the franchise. Like, where the fuck was Tenzin? Tenzin is the ultimate G. I just came to see the film to see him and he wasn't even in it. For films of the Uncharted series, this adaptation feels like a real missed opportunity. While people unfamiliar with the games might find some surface level entertainment here, it lacks any heart, depth and excitement that made the games a standout franchise. Do yourself a favour and just YouTube the cutscenes from the games instead. You'll have a way better time, I promise ya. A bad and boring movie. Fuck right off, mate.